Now, as Israel expanded its ground offensive in Gaza, intense fighting is continuing. Israeli strikes have now targeted refugee camps.
Now, this latest move threatens to derail the ongoing hostage release talks, and this as the war is now expanding well beyond Israel's borders.
Now, let's begin with what's happening on ground first. In the latest, Israel, it is confirmed that it attacked a densely populated refugee camp in North Gaza. It's called the Jabalia refugee camp. Palestinian health officials say that at least 50 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes on the camp.
Now, these visuals on your screens show the scale of the devastation caused in the aftermath of the attack. Israel army says it secured a central Hamas stronghold in the refugee camp airstrike, and the IDF has announced that its fighter jets eliminated commander of Hamas Central Jabalia battalion. Now, who they say was one of the leaders responsible for the deadly terror attack on October 7th.
Intense fighting has taken place in Gaza in the last 24 hours. This as Israel continues to pound Gaza relentlessly as it has sent its ground forces into the enclave. Israel says its troops have hit anti-tank missile launching cells and observation posts, seizing many guns and explosives and killing dozens of militants.
Now, Hamas armed wing said it had ambushed troops in northern Gaza, with its fighters having opened fire on 3 Israeli military vehicles. The Israeli army later said 2 of its soldiers were killed during combat operations in northern Gaza.
Moving on to the hostage situation now, the military wing of Hamas says that the group plans to release some non-Israeli hostages they've been holding in the coming days. In a video statement, the group announced that the release had been arranged through mediation by some nations. Though these nations were not named, Hamas also did not reveal how many hostages would be freed, but said that the group no longer had the desire or the need to keep them.
Meanwhile, Qatari Prime Minister has told visiting Thailand Foreign Minister that efforts are on to secure the release of the hostages. However, after the Israeli strike on Gaza's refugee camp, Qatar has warned that Israeli aggression can undermine the talks on hostages.
Meanwhile, the war is expanding beyond the borders. Tensions have been rising on the Israeli border with Lebanon ever since the war began, as the fighting continues with militant group Hezbollah. On Tuesday, Lebanon accused Israel of white phosphorus attacks, over which it said it would file a complaint at the United Nations.
Elsewhere, let's talk about what's happening in Yemen. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels, they said that they attacked Israel on Tuesday again, and they quote-unquote launched a large batch of ballistic missiles, and a large number of armed aircraft were launched at Israel. Now, the Houthi rebels pledge more attacks against Israel if its war on Hamas in Gaza continues.
Shifting our focus to the aid situation then in Gaza, dozens of Egyptian volunteers at the Rafah crossing facilitated the movement of aid trucks into Gaza on Tuesday.
Meanwhile, the White House said that 66 trucks of humanitarian assistance entered Gaza in the last 24 hours and that dozens more are expected to be cleared for deliveries. U.S. acknowledges that the level of truck aid deliveries so far is just a fraction of how much is actually needed in the Gaza Strip. U.S. officials say they would like to reach up to 100 trucks a day.
Meanwhile, the United States is sending an additional 300 troops to West Asia. Pentagon says the troops would be going from the United States but would not be in Israel, and they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection.
In other updates, Bolivia has announced that it is cutting diplomatic ties with Israel as it demands an end to attack in the Gaza Strip. Bolivia accused Israel of committing crimes against humanity and has become the first country to sever ties with Israel over the war with Hamas.
En el marco de su posición principista de respeto a la vida, ha tomado la determinación de romper relaciones diplomáticas con el Estado de Israel en repudio y condena a la agresiva y desproporcionada ofensiva militar israelí que se realiza en la Franja de Gaza y la amenaza de la paz y la seguridad internacionales.
And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen in.
The White House on Monday agreed with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that a ceasefire would only play into Hamas's hands. However, the Biden administration in recent days has been warming up to a humanitarian pause, mostly to get aid to Gaza, but also because while the majority of Americans support Israel's right to defend itself and also its war against Hamas, there are deep divisions among Democrats on Capitol Hill, not to mention a drop in Biden's poll numbers among Democrat voters. Less than 20% of Democrat voters now say they'll vote for Biden again in 2024 because of his unwavering support for Israel. The Democrats in Congress are now divided into two camps as well, those that are staunch supporters of Israel and those that are on the left and are vocally pro-Palestinian. It's also important to note that the American public, well, as I mentioned, the majority do support America's support for Israel. The American public is also very impatient when it comes to wars and U.S. involvement. While right now that support is there, it's unclear as the war drags on and the casualties on both sides increase how this sentiment may change. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.